Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning for some of our visitors here. Good evening for some others. Hi, Mike Wilson here, Chief Retail Officer at Red Iron. We got Jim Davidson with us
Hey,
also. Jim, say hello.
everyone.
Let's hit the counter. We'll just wait. Give everybody an extra 30 seconds to get in, and then we'll get rolling. Looks like people are flowing in here, so that's good. It's like the New Year's Eve counter, Jim.
Yeah.
Is the ball gonna drop?
Yeah.
All right, so here we go. Thank you everybody for joining. Pulse webinar series has been, a really good tool for us. We've got some really good feedback from, existing customers, potential customers, retail community, internally. It's something we've been working really hard to develop. So, thank you everybody that's a part of it, for developing it, and also thank you for, all of our attendees here. It's really important for us, to help get the message out around Pulse and, features, functions, and what it, what Pulse means from, how we're reshaping observability and what it means, for retailers. Today will be a little bit different. I'm going to go probably till maybe like 12, 13-ish. Try and just go like an 11 or 12 minutes on my side and talking. And then we're going to, dedicate majority of the meeting. Jim is going to, be clicking through within the software so we see, how the events really work. And, we've done a little bit of pre-work here just to help the demo move smoothly, but you'll get to see the tool in action and how it works and, how the observability platform of Pulse really helps drive meaningful results for retailers. So I'll be here during that time. You'll hear me, because I can't be quiet. So I'll be plopping in over the top of, of a lot of the demo. And then we'll try and wrap up for, with 5 minutes left for some Q&A. So feel free to email your questions over, put them in the chat. You could send them to info@redirontech.com and or pop them in the chat, and we'll try and get to as many as we can at the end. So here we go, episode 3, smart event correlation within Pulse. Pulse powering the next generation of retail observability. Just some quick, history on the webinar series so far. We've covered estate management and compliance components of Pulse, the targeted observations and real-time monitoring. Today we're talking about smart event correlation, and then our next session is going to be really focused on the data side, which is the unified data capture, and that's going to be February 6th. So for anybody that's in here in the meeting, we have the link either out or coming out, so please register for that. There's a lot that we're going to talk about today, but there's also a lot that's important around the data side. We believe there's a lot of leverage of this data. I'll talk about it a little bit later, in my wrap up about the importance of data to organizations and how data really is any organization's number one asset, and it's mostly not leveraged. And there's also some AI use cases that get informed by the data that comes from Pulse. So, that'll be episode 4. But today, let's dive in smart event correlation. These are really the core capabilities of Pulse. It's our honeycomb structure. These are really like, the 8 or 9 things that, Pulse functionality is kind of bucketized in. Today, we're talking about smart event correlation. And on the right-hand side here, what you see is, kind of a use case or a flow through Pulse. It starts with an issue, and that is anything that's happening within your cache lane, right? So it could be an issue with the pin pad. It could be an issue with the cache, which we're going to talk about today. It could be a network connectivity issue. It could be a third-party connectivity issue. It could be an issue with your connectivity to the cloud. And then that turns into an observation, which is what we covered in the last webinar. These are also published on YouTube, so feel free. And if you have questions about where that channel is, we're going to publish all past and future webinars to that channel. We've had some folks reach out already that want to go kind of rewatch it because myself and Jim, we tend to go very fast through this. It's like a half hour. It's really not, a lot of time for us to get through each one of these honeycombs, but you can go rewatch them. So, post observation, then it turns into an event, which is what we're covering today, and then we take it through remediation. So that's kind of, in the first webinar, and you go back and watch it, we did like some definitions of, kind of how we're reshaping the market and how we're really powering this next generation of observability, purpose built for retailers. And, it's everything from a cash lane. So in some of the club stores, you may have rollers, you may have scales, and in some of the bigger stores, grocery, you may have refrigeration units. Anything that sits within a store can be monitored and instrumented by Pulse. And I think that's, one of the differentiators. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about, I'm just going to jump to the next slide here, what retail KPIs are impacted, but, how we correlate events. So when you think about standard triage process is like, okay, I have to get a payment log. Okay, I have to get, a system log. Okay, I have to pull an error log. And then you're pulling all those things together and you're grepping and you're trying to tie together, with timestamps or with timing, how the issue kind of correlates. And Pulse lets you do all that in one place, looking at one screen. So that's like a really important part. It helps. We're going to talk a little bit about this slide about MTTR and MTTD. So, the mean times to resolution, the mean times to detection, how those things are, some of these KPIs, which I guess we'll just start talking about them now, we want to go up, right? So you want conversion in your store. And the top line is, really what's our store level KPIs, and how, if you're on this call and you own the store side of the business, how Pulse can help you drive these KPIs. The bottom line is, really the IT KPI. So if you're wearing an IT hat, and I used to wear both, right? A stores hat and an IT hat. So it was really important, for both of these KPI, sets of KPIs. But the bottom line is the IT KPIs. So how are you as an IT provider and a technician, within your organization, helping drive this top line, no pun intended, but the top line that we have here of KPIs by making your ones down the bottom, a little bit better. So conversion, obviously really important. Less lane downtime. You're going to be able to convert more percentage of the people that walk through the door of your store, right? Multiple businesses call the next one multiple different acronyms, but average transaction value, average order value, how the shoppers that are there are buying more because there's less friction at the checkout and there's less like, oh, it was an issue with PimPad. I don't really have that much time. I really only came here for 3 things. I don't need to buy the 7 things. I'll take the 3 things and I'll get out of here. Inventory turns. It's one we don't really, I think, in the industry talk about enough, but that's a big one, right? The faster you can move people through, the faster that inventory turns around, the more financial health there is within your business. And, the store folks on this, and especially the inventory management, distribution center teams that are on this call will really hear that, right? The turns, getting your turns to be better is the most healthy thing for your business. Everybody, all the financial updates, all public companies always talk about turns and how important that is to the metrics of the business. Margin, right? That's the lifeblood of everything that we do. More margin that you make, the better it is for you. So basket size goes up, conversion goes up. All those things buoy margin, right? So you want margin to go up as high as possible. And it's 2 components of it, right? Better sales, more throughput, but also you're lowering some of your CapEx and your OpEx when you talk about the repair costs being lower. And, Pulse already, its lifetime in the field has been able to extend that hardware lifespan. I was on the call with a customer this morning, and there's really like this whole value engineering concept that comes within extending your hardware. And it doesn't mean that you have to always be a dinosaur with your hardware, but you also don't have to be bleeding edge all the time either. So it really helps to help that lifetime of that hardware be extended, right? And then the IT ones, these are the ones that the IT folks on the call, some things that'll resonate with you, but the uptime of the POS. How important it is to just have those lanes available for customers and associates to ring and click and collect and check out customers. the health of the transaction. So when you're in an offline situation or you have a third-party timeout, your transactions are not that healthy. You may always want to know information about your customers. You may have to link in loyalty or link in some Omni data, whether it's same day pickup, click and collect, any of the Omni use cases. When you're impacted at the store, most of the POSs are engineered to make sure you could take that transaction. But there's this richness of data within your transactions that you want to make sure is healthy all the time. MTTR, MTTD, we don't have to spend too much time on that. We spoke about that, but just faster issue detection and resolving things quicker for the business. And then last one is, I know I lived this for a very long time, but there's like this alert fatigue that comes up. I got 6,000 alerts. How do I parse through all of them? Are they real? Are they not real? Is it just, something's flopping from primary to backup? That's not something we really want to pay that much attention to, but, this is a hard down situation. And, that all goes into, we kind of covered this and I'll go over quickly in the previous webinars, but the shape of an outage, right? Is it one store or more? Is it regional or global? How many stores are in the queue at the help desk? Let's open a P1, get on the bridge. Let's get the network team involved. Let's look at the database, open a SEV1, multiple providers. You might not even know when the issue starts exactly where the issue is, but you're doing as much as you can to make sure that you get the business back online as quickly as possible. So, today Jim's going to dive deep into smart events and event correlation. And this is just, again, go back. If you want this deck, we'll send it out, but you can read it in the YouTube as well. Or feel free to take screenshots also. But it's really what events and that correlation mean within the context of Pulse. So 6 scenarios. I'll go quick. The 2 with the red arrows are the ones we're going to cover today, which are corrupt file cache transfer. Everybody sees that. All POSs rely on caching. It's important that it's all correct. And Pulse can help you figure out when you're in a large estate, or even if you're in a small estate. Let's say, you have 300 registers and, 12 of them don't have the right cache. You're not going to be applying proper pricing, proper promotions. You may not have your cache data about loyalty or your clienteling or all the stuff that's important when your customers come in. The pin pad alerting, right? That's a huge one. Somebody takes a pin pad at a depot, and maybe you have a third-party help desk or third-party field services provider, and they just plug a pin pad in, and now it's like, okay, I'm done. I left. Like the pin pad's plugged in, but hey, it's not running the right version, and Jim's going to cover that today, so we can, really find out when those things happen. You as an IT team get an alert, you figure out how to fix it, and then it's fixed before you have to wait to hear from a store or, God forbid, the dreaded escalations that come through, our field partners. So, some of the other, just 4 other kind of real world scenarios that Pulse helps you, fix. Internet monitoring, we've heard from customers that, they have a satellite internet that runs as a backup and their primary is actually really slow. So, Pulse can help identify and triangulate and do some telemetry on that. One I lived personally was, a loyalty provider of ours just made a change one fine night overnight, and all of our loyalty was crashing in the morning. So it's really important. If I had Pulse in that scenario, I would have found out about it almost immediately. We didn't get, kind of any notification from our loyalty provider. And, it goes back to governance, right? Which was like our first, webinar episode. But, getting ahead of that change and knowing about that before it impacted a singular customer would really have saved us a lot of headache, but also bottom line margin and, the profitability for stores. And that's, a lot of people are incentivized by that. Your business runs off your margin. So it's important to get ahead of that. Credit card routing, right? You always want to be optimal in that situation. You want to make sure that you have the right rails, you're routing them correctly. You're getting to, if your credit card provider has multiple endpoints, that store is pointing to the, correct place, right? And multi-zone cloud, another one. You may have third-party providers. You may yourself have kind of published applications, and you want to make sure, I have a store in California, it should be pointing to the region or zone that's closest to that from a cloud perspective and not be having to traverse, the whole country for, sending traffic. So again, optimal experiences for your customers, optimal experiences for your associates. We're going to jump into the demonstration. I think, Jim, 1 minute over against my commitment to you, so got to steal a minute, but Go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing. You start sharing your screen, and then we'll let the folks see what we got going on.
Okay. So today we're going to look at turning an observation into a pulse event. And an event can be a notification via email or text, or it could be generating an API call to a webhook or creating an XML file that's transferred to a specific file location where another process picks it up. So hopefully everyone has already seen the first two webinars and understands what an observation is. But a quick refresher is that a pulse observation is any information that is captured for analysis. Whether it's an error message being reported or the version number of an application, an observation is simply a unit of information to work with. So once you start pulling observations out of all the data you have on a register, you can then create events whenever one of these observations occurs. And so a good example of where an event can be very useful is with an observation for a corrupt cache file. And so this is a term used in fluid pause, for example, where when a register's cache has become corrupt, the lane is essentially unusable until that cache file is refreshed. So first, let's take a look at that corrupt cache observation. And if we come in here to features, it's under my pause logs, and it's under something called retail error log. And so in this retail error log, I've got a whole bunch of different observations that I'm pulling out, one of them being corrupt cache. And so if I take a look at this, over here on the right, we've got a snippet of the log, and you can see, this string cache status corrupt. That's what we're triggering our corrupt cache observation on. Okay. So now if we go back and we take a look at, we're going to go into events. Okay. And so again, I got a number of different events created here, one of them being corrupt cache. And we'll take a look at this guy. And so here's our initial setup. And so you give it a name, a description. In this case, I'm using file transfer. But again, we have email. We can run a script. We can do a text. We can do a webhook. Okay. I've chosen from my pause logs the observation called corrupt cache. And if we come into so on my template screen here, this is where I define all the particulars. So the endpoint being, this is an FTP site, for example. And then I've got a file name. And you'll notice in my file name that node name here is in blue. And that blue represents is it's a property. And so for every observation that we gather all of the properties that we've defined on a register at the time the observation was captured. And so node name is obviously one of them, but there's other properties that we are also catching. So depending on what this file needs to contain, you can choose any or all of these properties. And so I've got node name being one of them for in the file name itself. And then in the body here, this is the actual XML file that we need to pass into the message queue to regenerate the cache. And again, I've got node name down here where it needs to go. Okay. So then I'm just going to go over here. And on our additional settings, we have this trigger. And so in this case, I've got it triggering on every occurrence, but we also have options for, I'm going to wait until I see X number of these observations on a node or across my estate before I trigger an event or an alarm. And I've got a snooze type here, and the snooze interval is 45 minutes. And so what that's useful for is if pause is going to report out that the cache is corrupt every minute or every 5 minutes, I want to give this event time to do its thing. So it's going to create an event. It's going to transfer an XML file to an endpoint. There'll be a process there that picks that up, puts it on a message queue. That cache will then get regenerated for this lane, and then that lane will pull it down. And so in this case, I'm going to give it 45 minutes. And after that 45 minutes, if the lane reports the cache file is still corrupt, then we'll trigger this process all over again. Okay. So click OK there. And so we're going to check a couple of things. And so this is the endpoint where I've got it's empty at the moment. And I'm going to take a look at my observation counts for the day, and I don't have any observation counts. Now, I've got a simulator, And this simulator allows me to send data into Pulse as if it came from an lane. And so in this case, I'm simulating this reg at 7:05 reg 1. And so in my pause logs, I choose retail error log. And then I've got a corrupt cache snippet. And so this just gives me the details that we saw when we looked at the observation. And I can inject that here. And I can click on process. And it says submitted. And I'll come back over here. I'll do an update, and we'll see we've got a count of 1.
Jim, just for the folks on the phone, that's a tool that we need to use to, just kind of inject data. And, Pulse, obviously when you get Pulse in your estate, you can use that same tool to run and test your observations and take a log snippet, put it in, make sure that all your logic is sound before you kind of release the observation into the wild, and, make sure that's picking up what you want it to pick up.
Okay. And if I drill down on that count, I can see where it came from, and I can even drill down even farther to see a collection of times, and even more farther down, and I can see the log that it came from. Okay. And so if we click here, and if we go back to our FTP site, and I do a refresh, so you can see I've got corrupt cache, and I've got the node name embedded in there from my variable property. And if I open this guy up, again, we can see that the property was inserted there. Okay, so that's a very...
Jim, just to talk through what just happened here, right? A register had a corrupt cache. The system detected it. The system put out a heal file to heal it, and no human had to be involved. Obviously, we're clicking through it, but in the wild, that's what would happen. You would have a register that reports a corrupt cache to Pulse. Pulse detects it. It generates an output file, and then your register will be healed with the cache regeneration process.
Yep.
So that's like really important just for everybody on the phone to know, or on that came to the webinar today. That's no human required in the loop to be able to correct a corrupt cache.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Now let's take a look at another one. So I'm going to take a look at an email notification. And so for those that attended the first webinar, you'll recall how we talked about estate management and compliance, a lot of it around device management. And so let's just say that you completed a pet audit, and all your devices are to be running, or are running, version 15.320, for example. Okay, so we're going to go back into our features, and I'm just going to show you under the ORIS archive. So in here, I've got an observation for PinPad version. And so out of my EFT vendors log, they publish software version for the device. And so I'm pulling that out, and you might notice over on here, I've got two different things. I've got a property and an attribute. And the reason for that is when I have an attribute, it allows me to create what we call a child observation. And that child observation, in this case, I've created something called wrong PED release. And any of the attributes that I collect from an observation can be used as a qualifier for this child observation. And so in this case, I've got an attribute, and I'm saying if it's not equal to this, then that's the wrong PED release. Okay, so, and I'm going to take a look at go into our profile here and back into events. And so I've got an event called wrong PED release. And if we look at the details on it, it's going to be sent out as an email this time. And again, I'm using this observation wrong PED release. And then on my template, obviously this screen is different depending on the type of event being done. I've got the node name embedded again in the subject, but I've also got some things down here, the original PinPad version that's being reported, and the PinPad serial number. Okay, and then if I hit next, In this case, I want to be notified each and every time. No snoozing. And I'll close that. And I want to come over to reporting, and we're going to take a look at one of the particular nodes. So this store 3 reg 1, if we take a look at it, so these are all the properties that we are capturing on the lane. And so you'll see that I've got PED version is 15.320. Okay. So now I'm going to bring up another simulator. So this simulator is for that particular lane. So what we're going to do here is we're going to use the K log, and we're going to come back down here in pin PED version. And so in this, if I take a look here, what I'm doing is I'm sending data as if it's going to be 15.314 release. Okay, so I inject that and I click on process, and it says okay. All right, so now I come back here and let me refresh this. And I come in here, and you'll see now it's 15.314. Now, what we'll want to do is check on our mail, and we'll do there we go. So here's my notification, and it shows me, this lane, store 3 reg 1, it's running 314. The serial number is this, and the PED release should be 15.320. Now, if I had included my EFT provider on this notification, then I've kind of closed the loop. That device gets dropped into a store, either from old stock or whatever, gets loaded. Pulse detects that it's the wrong version. It's going to send an email alert to your support team. It's also going to send one out to the EFT provider, and that can be their trigger to say, hey, okay, let's set the process in place to update that lane tonight, and you've covered that all off without any resources on your own side. So that's a quick look at events. Mike, I'll pass it back to you.
Sure. Thank you. Good stuff there. Let me just make sure I'm properly sharing here. And we got one question, so I'm gonna share, and then we'll get into the question. So we'll just click through pain points. I think we talked enough about them. Episode 4 coming up, so please register for that. That's happening on Friday, the 6th of February. And let's take a look at the question. I'll go on my teams here. When you create an event, do we have to update the registers before it's effective? Okay, yeah, really good question. Thank you for submitting that. And the answer is no. As long as the register's already sending logs, the events become effective immediately when enabled. And I think there's a lot of importance, actually, just thinking through that really quickly. You don't have to do a rollout or a deployment or anything to actually make that happen. So, thinking about the time to value from when you go create that event to when you can actually take action on it, it's immediate. And that's really important, going back to, one of those kind of key themes of MTTR, MTTD getting lowered and getting faster on top of issues. Also, there's no disruption to operations. You don't have to call store, make sure something checked in. It's automatic. And, there's no disruption to your estate. So going back to episode 1 about the governance and compliance, you create an event and there you go. Boom, it's ready, it's working off central, right? And really is one of the differentiators of Pulse, like tools that would require a huge change on your registers. You have to test it, you have to deploy it, you have to make sure it's rolled out. It'll activate the detection within real time, and then you start to see everything go down. Your risk goes down, cost goes down, friction goes down from your operational standpoint, and everything, just kind of works as is. So Good questions, good engagement. Please feel free to keep emailing stuff over, info@redirontech.com. We've got a lot of good traction on this. We've done a lot of breakout sessions. We're very happy to talk to you about this. I'm sure you could see myself and Jim take this like a passion. It's very important to us and the Red Iron team to kind of evangelize this solution and get it out in front of you, to where we can really start driving effectiveness, for our clients. So time, I think we're right at 12:30. Thank you very much, everybody. Happy Friday. We'll see some of you at NRF. Most of the Red Iron team's going tomorrow, so we'll be there from tomorrow till Wednesday. Feel free to ping, text, stop by, and we'll be happy to see you, and we'll talk soon.
Okay.
Have a good weekend. Thanks, everybody. Jim, thanks again. Really good job, too.
Right.
Thank you
Thanks.
for everything. See ya.